Hey Raider Nation, what's up? Jesse Merrick here. Welcome into another episode of the Silver and Black Sports Network podcast. We've got another stacked show for you today. You guys have been clamoring for some draft talk, so today we've got just that for you. We're bringing in Dalton Wasserman from Pro Football Focus to help us dissect the quarterback class in this year's upcoming draft. I know you guys are tired of all these band-aids at quarterback. So on today's show, we're bringing you a quarterback of the future segment that's tailor-made for you guys, Raider Nation. Yeah, Dalton helps me analyze which quarterback is the best fit for the Raiders, and he helps me explain how they could go around building around him for the future. Plus, we talk about all the different approaches that the Raiders actually could take at the top of the draft there and as the draft unfolds as well. And finally, we break down the upcoming matchup with the Broncos too, because after all, look, the season is still going on. We can't forget about that, even though I know a lot of people punted on it. But as always, too, here on our Friday show, we've got another installment of Raiders Rounders with our homie Matt Perrault. This week, he's got a lot of props for you that could make the game against Denver more interesting for you to watch. All that and more coming your way on today's show. But before we do get it rolling, I got two things for you. First, go to silverandblacksportsnetwork.com. It's linked above here if you are watching us on YouTube, or you can find it linked in the description of this as well, wherever you guys are watching us. When you get there, sign up for our free Raiders newsletter. It's jam-packed with Raiders news, insights, and analysis heading into the weekend's matchup. And again, it's free. There's no better deal in sports, and it's also a great way to help support our growth as well. And secondly, the question of the day for you here, all right? Since we're talking about the draft, specifically QBs, I'm curious which quarterback you guys have got your eyes on. I know we won't know officially who's declared for quite a while, but if you could have your pick of any of the guys in the draft, who would you want to see the Raiders take at the top of the draft and why? Well, you guys think of that? Let's get it rolling, beginning with our conversation with PFF's Dalton Wasserman. It was a good time. All right, Dalton, let's dive right into it, man. No pulling punches. It has been a rough season for the Raiders. They're sitting at 2-10 right now. A lot of people mad at the way things have transpired with Geno Smith. And look, some of it's been his fault. Some of it is the fact that they have an offensive line that's like Swiss cheese, you know? So I'm curious how you wrap your head around what's kind of happened for the Raiders at QB with Geno Smith and kind of what happens going forward at that position for them.
Yeah, look, I had a lot of optimism on this offense going into the season, right? You had Ashton Jitty, had a decent group of receivers, one of the best tight ends in football in Brock Bowers, and it seems like at least offensively, team should have been competent enough to compete most weeks, but it's really all just kind of fallen apart, especially since Colton Miller got hurt and then he started racking up the rest of the injuries on the offensive line. That's the biggest problem that I see week to week is that they can't block anybody. In our metrics, they have, I think, a bottom 3 or 4 offensive line in the league right now, and it's a serious mismatch anytime you're looking at that. Geno Smith under pressure. He's been trying to get rid of the football, but it's been inaccurate because he's been under so much pressure. They can't get the run game going with Ashton Jitty, obviously, and people are ripping the Jitty selection, but no back in the league. We've seen this even with guys like Saquon Barkley. If you can't block at least a competent level, no back in the league is going to succeed at a very high rate. So I think just everything's gone wrong for this offense, and that's even kind of displayed by them firing Chip Kelly, right? It's just every last thing has gone wrong. The play calling, the blocking, rushing, passing. So they really need a full reset on that side of the ball.
Yeah, no, I would agree 100%. And, I've come around to the idea that this may be a kind of a one-and-done season for Pete Carroll, which I think is tough for Raiders fans to hear because it has been this, wash, rinse, repeat of new coach each and every year just about. But do you think Geno comes back next year, or do you think they really need to move on from him and kind of reset at that position?
I think they're going to move on. I think it's even more likely that they move on. If Pete Carroll does go, I think it's guaranteed that they're moving on from Geno. You look at it, if they cut him, I believe, by the 3rd day of the new league year, it's an $18.5 million dead hit, which sounds like a lot, but when you think about it in terms of, like, say, call it the quarterback budget, right, when teams are always looking for the rookie contract guy, and then, the top guys are making $50 to $60 million, taking a hit on $18 million next year in a year where they're probably not going to go very far anyway during the season, I think makes sense. And if they wait until after that point, then that goes up to $26 million. So it's really that 3rd day of the league year in March where you're going to see, okay, is Geno going to stay for the season? Because I would assume once it goes up to 26, they've already made that decision anyway. So I think he's going to go. I think they're going to be possibly picking in the top 5 of this draft, and they'll take one of the top draft prospects.
Yeah, and I'm curious your take on the guys that are coming out. Obviously, there's some guys that could go back right now, but looking through the rankings, it seems like with you guys, your homies over there at PFF, they've actually got Ty Simpson as the number one guy. Fernando Mendoza is another guy that Raiders fans have been talking a lot about as well. How do you kind of dissect the top handful of QBs, and what do you think it'll look like there in the top portion of the draft in regards to the QBs?
I think it's tough to evaluate them in the context of we're not even 100% sure that any or all of these guys are going to come out yet. None of them are true seniors that have to come into the draft. But the three guys that stand out, you mentioned Fernando Mendoza from Indiana, who's had an outstanding year. He's got a big week coming up this week against Ohio State, the number one, number two matchup with them in Indiana. You've got Dante Moore from Oregon, who's just been red hot all year. He's really been outstanding behind one of the best offensive lines in the country, and that's going to be a big question with him is, okay, if you don't have the best pass protection in the nation, what are you going to look like under a lot of pressure? It wasn't great in the Indiana game, but he's honestly been outstanding. His eyes and his arm talent are really good. And then Ty Simpson, like you mentioned, who, in Trevor's, the last time he really did a big update on the big board there, it was the middle of the season. It was Ty Simpson's hot streak where they won, I think, 4 straight ranked games in the SEC, but cooled off a little bit, and there's going to be questions as to how he can deal with pressure as well. Those are the three main guys that you're really looking at. I think it's still to be determined, and it's going to take a lot of tape study to decide which one of them is the best of the three and who's going to go, first among those three guys. But that's really the three main options you're looking at here.
Yeah, and the way things are playing out, it's almost looking like we could end up in a situation where there could be some trades that have to be made at the top of the draft. I mean, let's see, maybe Tennessee gets the top pick again, and then, who knows after that? Maybe the Giants are sitting there at 2, Raiders possibly at 3, 4. So just in terms of not knowing what happens from here, in that top 5, like, what do you think would be the best option for the Raiders if they had their pick of the QBs?
I would probably just slightly lean towards Dante Moore, and it's very close, and I'm very curious to see what Fernando Mendoza looks like against Ohio State this week and then going into the playoff against some of the elite teams in college football. It's probably one of those two guys, Moore or Mendoza. I think Simpson, I think some of the work he needs to do under pressure and against the blitz, he needs to work on some things as far as processing those things a little quicker and reacting better to them. But again, those are things that are teachable. Simpson's also very good. But I think for me, if you ask me right this second, I would say Dante Moore, but it's very close between him and Mendoza.
Yeah, and you talked a bit about Moore, but I'm just curious, like, and there could be so much change in Vegas, again, if they move on from Pete and this roster could be overhauled in a big way. But with the pieces that we know will be here, and Ashton Jeanty and Brock Bowers, obviously, we got Trey Tucker, who's a young receiver for the Raiders as well. How do you think a Dante Moore would fit into what the Raiders are doing, and how do you think they should build an offense around a guy like him?
Well, and this is the big question, right? Because even if they keep Pete Carroll, now they need a new offensive coordinator. They have to decide what they want to be, right? And I think the problem is if you don't have the proper offensive line that can hold up in the run game, that can hold up in pass protection, it really doesn't matter what offense you're running. If it was me, I think a lot of the trendy teams in the NFL are moving towards more multiple tight end sets, right? 12 personnel, some teams even 13 personnel with 3 tight ends on the field. They're throwing out of those sets. They're getting in light sets, and then they're running it. They're finding ideal box counts and personnel matchups to deal with there. So I would base this. I would find a coach. I mean, I know like Ben Johnson is a high-end example who's done it now for the Bears. We've seen what Clint Kubiak is doing in Seattle. Maybe that's a guy, Clint Kubiak, the offensive coordinator for the Seahawks, which, you double dipping going back to the Seattle kind of heritage there. But Kubiak's done such an unbelievable job with that offense, and Sam Darnold getting in 2 tight end sets and finding ways to work backwards and throw the football and then run out of lighter sets, right? Somebody like him. I think if Kevin Stefanski were to come available, if the Browns were to fire him, I think that'd be a great hire. He's an awesome coach who's just been dealt a bad hand at quarterback and a couple other spots. So there are guys like that, but I would really try to base this offense as much around those 2 guys, like you mentioned, Ashton Jeanty and Brock Bowers, and their abilities to win in both the run game and the passing game.
Yeah, this week in particular, I've had a conversation with a couple different people talking about those multiple tight end sets, and that bodes well for the Raiders having Brock and also Michael Mayer as well. And I think that is something they need to lead into because it's so, in vogue in the NFL right now. And those tight ends are, matchup nightmares when you have a dynamic guy like that. And I'd be real curious to see, what an offense really built around that looks like. Because I think that's something we thought we were going to see more of with Chip Kelly in charge. Obviously, the injuries played a factor in that, but it didn't quite come to fruition for them. I am curious, and Raiders fans are going to go nuts at me on this video, but if they were to punt on quarterback at the top of the draft, are there any guys in particular you're like, hey, these dudes could help the Raiders, and then maybe they go in the later rounds for a quarterback?
So, man, there's a lot because realistically, you look at this Raider team, and they do need a lot of help, right? I think they're there are guys on the offensive side, like an offensive tackle, like a Francis Mauigoa from Miami and a Spencer Fano from Utah, who could be really good. And Mauigoa especially is intriguing because they like DJ Glaze at tackle. I think Mauigoa, even if you wanted to move him into guard, he could be one of the best guards in football. You could go wide receiver. To me, they really need a number one type wide receiver. Jordan Tyson would be a guy
Yeah.
that would entice me a bit. If you want, that would be the road you go down if you want to keep Geno Smith one more year just to kind of hold over and, you don't love this classic quarterback. And then look, defensively, outside of Max Crosby, they need just about everything on defense, right? So if you told me, it was a Reuben Bain Jr. if he was available at the other edge spot, fixing your run defense and your pass rush, fine. Caleb Downs, it's safety, special football player. I know safeties don't usually go in the top 5 or 6, but that's a special guy who can change your defense. So these are the guys. I know Arvell Reese from Ohio State, the linebacker / maybe edge player, is another one that's getting a lot of high praise right now. So I really think if they're going non-quarterback, they could go any which way they want to go about it and just take the best player that they feel is available and the best fit for their football team.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. I want to clarify, I think quarterback is the move for them. I think you think that too. They've been kicking the can down the road for too long. But like you noted, this team needs talent. They need difference makers all over the place on this roster. And if they go that route, I'd be interested to see which way they do end up going. And so if they do that, who are some, quarterbacks maybe second round on that you would be like, hey, this could be a dark horse, someone that maybe you could kind of develop and build your team around down the future, if that's the route they were to choose to go?
Yeah, I think some of this too depends on who is going to declare and who isn't, right? Lenore Sellers from South Carolina, he's a supreme athlete with just great rushing ability and a huge arm. Not sure if he's going to declare out of South Carolina or not. Carson Beck is a guy who will be in this draft, and he's at least solid. I don't think he has the high end ceiling that some of the other guys have, but I think he's got either low end starter or high end backup potential in the same way that maybe a Mac Jones does. Garrett Nussmeier is someone who's intrigued scouts for a long time. He's got a big arm. He's got an understanding of how the drop back game works and having being in a high volume passing attack down there at LSU. Tough year this year between injuries and the lack of offensive line. That really hurt him. He's a little bit limited athletically, but Nussmeier's a guy with at least starting potential. And then I still wonder if teams take at least a look at Clemson's Cade Klubnik, maybe somewhere in that third, fourth round range, if that's where, he were to be in that range. So there's plenty of guys. Again, we got to see who's going to declare. Maybe, some teams that like John Mateer from Oklahoma, I think he can stay in school for another year. But there's a lot of options. It's just a matter of what kind of offense, again, you're trying to run and what fits in that best.
Yeah, that'll obviously dictate so much depending on who the coaching staff is for this team. I am curious, though, too. Okay, let's say, they try and figure out a way to make the quarterback situation work with somebody that's already in the league right now. One situation that's kind of interesting is what's going on in Arizona with Kyler Murray. What do you think about a Kyler Murray and Raiders fit or what that could possibly look like about trying to bring him into the fold?
I think in the same way that keeping Geno Smith would be a one-year Band-Aid, I think Kyler Murray would probably be the same thing. I'm not a huge fan of the way that he's thrown the football over the last year and a half. It's been very inconsistent. It's been very conservative. And I just think if he's not going to be used in the run game with his legs in a dynamic way, then you're really limiting your options with him because especially the deep ball, the vertical passing doesn't look as good as it used to look. And that in his prime when he was an MVP candidate, that was really one of the best attributes about him was the deep ball and his ability to make an explosive play at any given time. This year, it's been too conservative, and I would be concerned that Jacoby Brissett walked in there and started creating more opportunities vertically down the field immediately than Murray did. So I don't think that would be a long-term solution. It would be an option if you want to go, okay, just 1 year or maybe, I don't know how it is between the two guys. So let's say the hire of a new head coach would say Cliff Kingsbury, right? Yeah. At least Murray would be familiar with Kingsbury, and that's something that, okay, maybe they could work on next year and deal with that. But I don't think that's a long-term solution by it.
Yeah, no, Raiders fans are tired of Band-Aids, at the quarterback position, that's for sure. They want to get that figured out. Now, since we are talking NFL, let's shift gears now and talk about this upcoming matchup with the Broncos. First time around when they played them, it was on Thursday Night Football. Probably one of the uglier games, on the NFL slate so far this year, as some Thursday Night Football games are. That one was a rock fight in every sense of the word. How do you wrap your head around what transpired in that first matchup and maybe how it could lead to what transpires in this game here on Sunday at Allegiant Stadium?
It was ugly. I would argue it was the ugliest ball game that we've watched all year from any two teams. It was rough. I mean, and really just the offensive execution on both sides was just poor, right? It was as bad a game as the Broncos offensive line has played all year, and they're generally very, very good. That's one of the best O-lines in the league. And the Raiders, they couldn't block anybody. They couldn't create any explosive plays. So I think the thing for both teams right now is that they're struggling to run the football. That includes Denver, who's really struggled to run it the last couple of weeks without J.K. Dobbins. He's done for the year with injury, but I think it's really going to come down to the trenches. And Denver, the biggest thing you have to ask yourself is, can we block them, and how can we block them? Because they got an elite
Yeah.
defensive line, too, that shows up every single week to play. Nick Benito, Zach Gallen, John Franklin Myers, Jonathan Cooper. They got a million guys on that defensive line, and they can mix it up with 4- and 5-man fronts. So that's really the biggest task, as it is every week for the Raiders. How in the world are we going to block this set of guys?
Yeah, and that's the problem. So last time out against the Broncos, they gave up 6 sacks. They have now given up 25 sacks in the last 4 games. It's just unreal. So for you, if you're Greg Olsen, the new play caller for the Raiders, how do you go about trying to contain this group up front, or at least maybe get the ball out quick to limit or mitigate the issues in protection that they have?
You do have to get rid of the football quickly, and I think the other thing to me, you can't let it be 5-on-5. You just can't do it. You have to leave an extra tight end in there. You have to have an extra back in there, or you have to get into the bootleg game and get Geno Smith, get the pocket rolling, so it's not both sides, and everybody just coming at him, all the sharks coming at him all at once, right? It's just a defense like that we're seeing right now. There's certain teams that you just can't play scat protection. You can't play 5 up against them. The Broncos, the Cleveland Browns, you just saw the other week at 10
Yeah.
sacks against you, right?
Crazy.
It's just insane. Even what the Dallas Cowboys are doing right now up front, certain teams you have to help out with 6- and 7-man protection. So I think if I'm Greg Olsen, if nothing else happens, they call it's a protection league. Nothing happens if you don't protect your quarterback. I don't care who Brock Bowers is, who the receivers are, anybody like that. I would be trying to A, get rid of the football quickly, and B, you have to leave extra guys in there to protect against that Denver defensive line. They're just so good.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And the tough part for the Raiders is that's how you need to do things up front to be able to mitigate the issues. But the problem is outside of Brock Bowers, you don't have a true receiving threat. So, you look in Seattle, they sit there, you mentioned the fact, they're running a lot of those, multiple tight end sets, but they also happen to have a guy in Jackson Smith and Jigba who can go out there and win on the outside. And the Raiders just sadly don't have anybody like that right now. They go and trade away Jacoby Myers. So, you need to figure out a way to win on the outside at some point if that's the approach for sure, and they just haven't been able to do that at a consistent pace. I'm curious on the other side of things, for Denver, Bo Nix. We've seen kind of an up and down season from him. What do you think is the key to stopping a Bo Nix? Because you said, the Broncos have struggled to run the ball since J.K. Dobbins has been out, and Nix has clearly been kind of riding that roller coaster ride. So where have you seen him struggle the most?
I think you got to find a way to make him move his feet, because the tendencies at times can be a bit erratic, and there's times where he's been a bit of a gunslinger and taking too many chances this year. So if you can make him move his feet, get outside the pocket, and start playing playground football, it's kind of like you almost have 2 versions of Bo Nix, and it goes back to college. You get the Auburn gunslinging, taking his chances version, and then you get the clean pocket Oregon version that is very accurate and can get raging hot at times, right? It's kind of that's the best way to describe Bo Nix right now as a quarterback. Hot and cold, right? If you're
Yeah.
dealing with hot Bo Nix and you get no pressure and he's got a rhythm 10, 12, 13 plays in a row, you're going to have an issue because he gets in that rhythm and then the accuracy, the footwork stays consistent. If you can get pressure and make him move his feet a little bit, make him make those throws outside the pocket, then he starts making more questionable decisions, right? Maybe, he's back there holding the ball too long and taking sacks and things of that nature. So I think that's really the big thing is if you can rattle him, especially early in the game, then you start getting a little more of that high variance version of Nix that gives you an opportunity.
Yeah, very interesting. And I'm curious for you too, just as an aside, this is a Raiders podcast, but at the end of the day, the Raiders are having a horrible season, so we mix in some NFL talk here and there. With the Broncos in particular, the style of play for them, I mean, they've been the comeback kids this year. Do you think that's something that's sustainable for them come playoff time?
I think it will be a bit dangerous because it speaks to, okay, you're not a consistently dominant team week in and week out. Now, credit to them and Sean Payton and Bo Nix and everybody there for finding ways to win big games, right? That includes the Kansas City game that may have really given the stranglehold on that division. The experience of playing in that close game, in those close games, I think is big time because that's what you're going to get in the postseason, especially in this year's AFC where there's no clear favorite. I do think it's going to help them. The bigger concern that I have is this J.K. Dobbins injury and their inability right now to run the football. The running backs, R.J. Harvey, Jaleel McLaughlin, they're really struggling. They don't have that workhorse back like they did with Dobbins, and I would worry that they can't control the pace of the game. in those stretches, 3-4 drives where Bo Nix does go a little bit cold, right? And if they fall behind, and then it's everything is on Nix, right? Those are the moments that I would worry about. But their defense is going to keep them in every game. That's part of the reason why they never get blown out. You talk about like the Eagles game when they had that big comeback against Philly. Big part of that, the glory always goes to the quarterback and making the comeback and all of that. But you got to make stops in those moments too to get yourself back in it. Denver is fully capable of doing that. So I don't think playing in a bunch of close games is at all a detriment to them and what their experience is going to be like in the postseason. But that's the one thing that would worry me more is their inability right now to run the football.
Yeah, this time of year or late in the season, you do need to be able to run the football for sure. Man, Dalton, you've been so generous with your time, man. I appreciate it. Great info. Before we get you out of here, let the folks know where they can find your work and what you kind of got cooking the next couple of days here.
Absolutely. Everything, all of our written content on PFF.com. We actually have a promo code going right now for a PFF Plus subscription, Holiday 30 for 30% off. And then, as always, on YouTube, you can find me with Trevor Sikkema on the PFF NFL show and with Max Chadwick on the PFF College Football show.
Awesome. Yeah. Hey, you guys go make sure you take advantage of that promo code. I am a PFF Plus subscriber. I throw those numbers out all the time, and fans sometimes get pissed off at me for constantly throwing the numbers out there and all of it. But I love it. It's good stuff. You guys put out a great product. Dalton, thanks again, man. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it big time, Jesse. Thank you.
Hey, good stuff from Dalton. As you know, he knows ball and can talk both the NFL and college game as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed that one. In the offseason, we will no doubt lean on him again for some insight leading up to the draft as the Raiders, eventually solidify what their draft positioning is going to be. In the meantime, let's hit this week's installment of Raiders Rounders with our guy, Matt Perrault. The game pick is pretty easy this week, let's be honest. But he does have some interesting props for you that could make watching the game more interesting. Take a listen. All right, Matt, we're back at it for week 14 of Raiders Rounders, as we always do. Let's go back and take a look at the week that was. You were talking leading up to that game that 9.5 was a big number for the Chargers. We're kind of trying to figure out how to wrap your head around that. The Chargers go on to win big. What was your takeaway, from that game from a betting perspective?
That the Raiders are the worst team in the NFL because they had every opportunity to cover that number, and any team that I think is worth their salt would have covered that number.
Yeah,
that got away from them in really ugly ways. And watching that game was one of the more frustrating bets I've made all year because the Raiders had every chance to be in that game, and they just kept on making mistakes. They just kept on doing self-inflicted wounds, kept on making just the little errors, the ball placement not being where it should be, a receiver, being 1 or 2 steps behind where he is supposed to be from a route perspective. The offensive line, a costly penalty when there's something, you have a drive, you're getting some momentum going. And I don't think the Chargers are that good of a football team. I really don't. I think when you watch them, Justin Herbert breaks his hand in that game. You had every opportunity to go ahead and win that game outright with the Herbert injury. And they just never could capitalize on everything that was presented in front of them. And then after the game, it's just more of the same old excuse making out of the, all the way up to Pete Carroll. It's just like, I like what we're doing. I like our fight. There's no moral victory type conversations going on, but this is the NFL. Like those conversations happen in college and I'm fine with it. This is not college. This is professional football. You're being paid to execute. And, Geno Smith this week was asked about his future and he gave like the worst answer you could ever hear from a quarterback, basically being like, yeah, my mind's in Cancun and I'm not going to be here next year. And I know I'm not going to be here next year. So let's just get these games done and then I'm gone.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. I will say, and I know I've made plenty of excuses for Geno, on this podcast over the weeks here. That's a tough question to be asked, in terms of giving an answer. But like we've said, he hasn't helped his case with the interceptions. And then also, again, with flipping off the fans and all that
Jesse,
stuff.
He said blame him. He said blame me. He said it.
Also true. Also very true. We're just taking his advice.
He went to the podium and was like, blame me for everything. Okay, well, I'm going to blame you when the team looks like that and you're the quarterback. Well, guess what, man? It falls at your feet. You've thrown 1 million interceptions. I don't care how many offensive linemen you have to work with. I don't care. Look, I'm a Patriot fan. I could sit here and talk about the lack of receiving core around Drake May, an MVP candidate, till I'm blue in the face, okay? He's not playing. He beat the Giants like a drum with 2 backups and really a sick center, a backup left guard, and a backup left tackle. So, we all can make mistakes till we're blue in the face about why we should be playing with better players or why things should work or whether or not Chip Kelly was intentionally sabotaging the season or not. But the things that are coming out of this organization, if I'm a Raider fan, I'm really concerned. Tom Brady says he wants to burn it to the ground. Okay, if you want to burn to the ground, what does that look like, Tom? Because is it 2-3 win seasons in a row? Like, what does burning it to the ground look like? Because I love Brady. I'm a Patriot guy. I'm a Boston guy. But these are weird comments coming from a quote owner of a franchise that Chip Kelly was his pick. He wanted Chip Kelly. Pete Carroll was his pick. He wanted Pete Carroll. 0 for 2, Tom. 0 for 2.
Yeah, and I think there's just a lot of things that we can get to in there. And I think the thing with Brady is like, look, if the Raiders were playing well, the narrative out there would be like Tom Brady pulling the strings behind the scenes,
100%.
how great he's been, all this stuff. And now that they're doing poorly, I think he kind of has gotten a bit of a pass, which I think is unfair. You know, so it can't be like both things like, oh, if they win, it's because of Tom. But if they lose, it's because of everybody else. Like, no. There were all the talk all offseason was how much Tom had his hands in everything that was going on. And he needs to answer for those things. Obviously, like, he's not up there, the owner, all that stuff. Like, but you know what I mean? Like, he had his hands in so much of this stuff. So, like, there needs to be, I think the narrative out there should be a little more of like, hey, what the hell, Tom Brady? Like, you know what I mean? So,
and he gets the pass because, like, oh, he's a broadcaster. Well, okay, where are your priorities, Tom? Like, you can't have it. It's a great point by you. You can't have it both ways. You can't say, well, I'm a Fox broadcaster, so, like, you know, I'm not there every day. So I don't know what really is going on between Chip Kelly and Pete Carroll. And I'm not really sure what Geno Smith and his development is like because, you know, I'm off doing a Chief game. So I don't know what's going on. That doesn't fly with me if you're going to sit there and say those things publicly of like, if we have to burn to the ground, we'll burn to the ground. Okay, Tom, get out of the booth then. Get in the ownership room, get in the room, get in the building, be seen, be accountable, and be a part of the franchise. I don't believe you can be an owner and a broadcaster at the same time. It has nothing to do with competitive balance. It has everything to do with focus and the amount of time it takes to be a competitive football team in the NFL and how difficult it is to be competitive in the NFL versus, heck, I'm a broadcaster. I love it. It's easy. It's a hell of a lot easier to sit up there in the booth and critique the quarterback than actually to go down there on the field and work with the guy. So that's my issue with Brady going forward. I think you're absolutely right. You can't take the praise when it's good, and then when it's bad, you can deflect and say, well, I'm not the owner, really. It doesn't work like that in my mind.
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, it's just funny how narratives work. And I know we're part of the media, so sometimes we drive a lot of those narratives. But it just nationally that hasn't come into, you know, the swing of things is crazy to me. And also to your point, too, other teams around the league have dealt with injury issues along the offensive line much better than the Raiders have. And I think, like we talked about, that goes back to a coaching perspective in terms of who's in that room. And I hate sitting here powering this one home. And I know fans are clamoring for Pete to fire his son and all that stuff. Like, that ain't happening. It's not going to happen. They're riding it through the rest of the season. But the coaching does need to be better in that offensive line room, and everybody knows it.
I don't know. It would be a really interesting thing in the offseason if Tom Brady went to Pete Carroll and said, hey, you or your son, which one? You can stay as the coach, but I need a complete overhaul of the offensive coaching staff. We got to change it all, including your sons. I really wonder if he would walk, because the more that I have watched this team this year and talked to you every week and read about the Raiders, the more that I think that Pete Carroll is just having fun with his kids. And I don't think that's as a father, I don't blame him for that at his age at 73 to have the experiences of going to work every day and seeing your sons be there, and you get to work with them in meeting rooms and fly with them and travel with them. Like, that's an unbelievable father experience. It's awful for football. It doesn't work for the game of football. And I wonder which one he would pick, being a head coach still in the NFL or getting that experience with his sons. My feeling is that he would rather coach with his kids. And that's why I think you might see a complete overhaul again for the Raiders this offseason.
Yeah, no, I agree that. And like on our previous podcast, I talked to Cody Alexander from Match Quarters, and he said, you know, he's a former defensive coach and everything like that. And he said from that standpoint, it almost seems like Pete Carroll didn't learn anything in the year that he had off. And all the talk in the offseason was about how much he learned and all the changes and different things he wanted to do. That hasn't quite transpired, you know, on the field with the way things have been done. I mean, still very similar in terms of what they were doing offensively, with the reports that he was kind of doing things, you know, the way that he wanted to with Shane Waldron and all that. And then also defensively, like, they've pared down the blitz in a crazy rate from what they were last year with Patrick Graham at the helm there. So yeah, I agree with you. That's a very interesting question, because I am curious like how he would handle it. But it just does feel like it's to the point where I think for all involved, even though it's been this vicious cycle of hiring and firing, I think it's time to move on. Hey, you tried it. He's obviously not getting any younger, and I know he hates that card, and I hate playing that card too. But you need to bring somebody in that can set a foundation. That's the thing, is this team, this Raiders organization does not have a culture or a foundation, and they need somebody that can come in and set that.
The Giants and the Raiders, both fan bases should be sick to their stomach as to what is going on in Denver and New England. You look at teams that made culture change hires. They brought in coaches. They got young quarterbacks. They developed the young quarterback. And look where both of them are right now at the top of the AFC. It can happen quickly in today's NFL if you get the right coach and the right quarterback. But you need to get the right coach and the right quarterback. And he can't be 73 years old. The age card stinks. I get it. But there has to be some level. Mike Vrabel is 50 years old. He's 50. I'm 48. He's my age. He's going to be there for as long as he wants to be there. That's what you need from a culture standpoint with the Raiders, to smooth this out and to stop this topsy-turvy every 2 years, firing your coach and starting over again.
Yeah, no, agreed 100%. And it's just going to be this vicious cycle until they figure that out. But anyway, man, I could sit here and talk about that all day. Yep. Obviously, I've done it all year, and I enjoy diving into it with you because you bring, an interesting perspective as well with it. And pull any punches, which I love, And so with that in mind, though, let's take a look at this game here. Last time, Broncos and Raiders was on Thursday Night Football. Probably one of the worst games of the year, just in terms of like rock fight-ness, if that's a word, if we want to create a word there. Now, so in that game, I remember you said you were like, hey, take the Raiders to cover. You thought they would lose, but you were like, take the Raiders to cover. They did. A really tight game. I forget what the number was on that one. This time around, though, totally different story. The Broncos come in as 7.5-point favorites. Circa even has them at 8-point favorites as we tape right now on Thursday morning. How do you wrap your head around that? Because I think everybody in the world knows, who's going to win this game.
Yeah, I think when it was on a short week, divisional game, and the Raiders defense having a chance to play Bo Nix, and we'll talk about their zone coverage here in a second, but that's why I liked the Raiders to keep the game close the first time around. This time around, I do not. It's a full week. It's a divisional game that the Broncos need. The Patriots are on a bye. They're competing with them in terms of the number one seed. I believe both Denver and New England must get the number one seed if they want to go play in San Francisco. I think going on the road for either team is going to be incredibly problematic. And the only reason why I wouldn't double hammer Donkey Kong slam this game for the Broncos is the fact that the Broncos have one of the craziest stats going on right now in the NFL, is that they have trailed in every game this season, and they have won 10 of those games. That is the most in the history of the NFL for a team to trail and to win that game that they've been trailing. And some of the games, like the Giant game, have been ridiculous. Like, they're not just losing, they're down huge, and they rally. And that was at home, thankfully for them. This game's on the road. I would just say typical bet the Broncos minus 7.5. I don't like Geno Smith in this offense against Denver's pass rush. Look, they gave up 10 sacks to the Cleveland Browns. This is the number one rushing of the quarterback defense in the NFL, and it's not just one guy like Myles Garrett. There's multiple guys you got to worry about with the Denver Broncos. I don't think the Raiders score. Their team total is 15.5. I think that goes under. I think it's a 10 to 15 point win for the Broncos. I don't know if it gets really ugly, but I do think turnovers could make the game very difficult for this Raider franchise to, at home, watch the Broncos walk in and dominate them. So I laid the 7.5.
Yeah, no, I agreed 100% because they're just at a different pace right now, different team, much better team. And like you said, the short week changes things, in that first matchup. You mentioned a couple things in there in terms of the number for this game and also turnovers. There's two prop bets that you're interested in this game in that regard.
Yeah, again, this is a rinse and repeat, but until further notice, you bet Geno Smith to throw a pick. And against this pass rush, he has, look at whether you want to say it's his fault or the offensive line's fault or the offensive coordinator's fault, whatever you want to come up with for an excuse. He is the leading guy throwing picks in the NFL. He rushes throws, and against a blitz-happy team, against a poor offensive line, this is just a rinse and repeat bet. Geno Smith, and the number is not expensive. You can get this for minus 120 at the time of taping. Geno Smith to throw a pick. Yes, on that. Isn't expensive. I expect him to be intercepted by Denver.
Yeah, and I think that's a good play just simply from the fact of, like, you go back. Obviously, Raiders fans will say, yeah, of course he's going to throw him because they've seen it all year. But he's only not thrown a pick in 3 games this season. So, like, the odds are ever in your favor on that one, like you said.
Were those
It's a
games
cheap
on the
bet.
road? Has he gone a
Let me
home
go
game
back
yet
and
without throwing a
see real quick.
Has
Let
he
me
gone a
look through
home
his.
game yet without throwing a pick? I think he's thrown a pick in every home game.
That was at Washington, at KC. Yeah, home game against the Browns, he did not have an interception.
Okay.
So,
All right. So,
yeah,
so
he's
2
had
and 1 on that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
one at
one
home.
home
So,
game all year.
which is pretty crazy, though, And
Yeah.
kind of in that same regard, though, we talked about Denver's defense. The total for this game, 40.5. You're taking the under, right?
Yeah, look. It's early in the week, but the pro money's on the under. It's driving it down. 40.5 is the number at the moment. Some books are already at 40. Again, team total Raiders is 15.5. I don't think they get there. I think it's a touchdown and a field goal drive for them here. So I wouldn't necessarily bet the Genti anytime touchdown, which has been a very consistent, bet to cash.
Yep.
It's getting a little dicey on my bet for Genti to go over 7.5 rushing touchdowns. He has 4. So we're getting a little bit on that like scary zone. Like I need a game where he gets 2. And so like just to kind of get me closer to that number. So I'm getting a little worried about that bet that I made back in August. But I think for here, Denver's offense is not great. We talked about Bo Nix a little bit. The numbers are crazy against zone coverage, and the Raiders lead the league in zone coverage. They play at 84% of the time. Bo Nix is 32nd in QBR against zone, 37th in yards per attempt against zone, 7 TDs to 6 interceptions against zone, but he's 7th in scramble rate with 157 yards rushing against zones. So his rushing prop is 16.5. I think you can take Bo Nix over on his rushing props, but I don't think Bo Nix lights the world on fire here and puts up 30 points against this Raiders defense. I expect another kind of, ugly 20-7 type football game. Broncos cover, but the game goes under.
Yeah, real sharp read of the stats, too, on that one to be able to come to the Bo Nix rushing over, your rushing yardage over on that one. I did talk to Pete and ask him about, the zone defense, what they love about it, and noted the fact of Nix's struggles in the press conference yesterday, and he kind of tongue-in-cheek said, well, I guess we're just going to play a ton of man. Wouldn't put it past them. It was a joke, obviously, in his regard. But I laughed, I thought it was funny the way he handled it, But I'm real curious to see what they look like defensively in this game. Obviously, again, running zone at that rate, they're going to keep doing that. And
at least Pete's got a sense of humor with 2 wins. That's
He hasn't lost that. I will 100% say that. That's the one thing that he hasn't lost is a sense of humor. All right, now let's go ahead. One thing I did want to add in there too, and this isn't one of your bets or anything like that. I'd just be real curious to see what the number is when it's said and done for Brock Bowers. We talked about it leading into the game against the Broncos, with Cody Alexander, and they have struggled covering tight ends. Their linebackers in coverage, not great. And in 3 out of their last 4 games, the leading receiver for the opposing team has been a tight end. The only game that their leading receiver was not a tight end in that stretch was the Raiders, because they only threw it to Brock Bowers 3 times and he had 1 catch. So curious to see what that goes for him. And I don't think they necessarily have a secret Brock Bowers defense. I think that was more on the Raiders than anything else.
Well, that was my question, and that's why I was going to bring it up, because like we had talked about that in the handicap of the first matchup of like Brock Bowers should be a weapon for and then they didn't even run plays for him. So
Crazy.
I'm a little hesitant just because of what the game plan was in the first matchup. They might think that they don't have enough time to get the ball to him for whatever reason. I don't know. It was the weirdest thing. So that would be my only hesitation with that, is that they should have done it in the first matchup. So maybe they do it in the second matchup, and that would be a good play to get ahead of the market with this. But that's my only pause of like, does Geno look for him? Like, is he the guy, or is Geno going elsewhere with his first and second reads?
Yeah, I would imagine they're going to go to him just because there's one thing that Greg Olsen, the new play caller, can do, and that's throw to tight ends. We've seen it, over the course of his career with the Raiders. If I remember right, in 3 out of his 4 seasons with the Raiders, in his last stint as the actual OC, his leading receiver was a tight end, and it wasn't even close. The only reason that Darren Waller wasn't his leading receiver in that final season was because he only played in 11 games, and Hunter Renfrow ended up being the top guy. And he still got 93 targets, even with those injuries. So that's the thing, is that Greg Olsen will hammer the tight ends. He loves his tight ends. Raiders fans know that. So again, just curious to see what it looks like now with a different play caller in this matchup against a team that struggles against the tight end. doing that. But let's take a look at the weekend's slate of games now too, Matt, and start diving into it. I think a lot of really interesting games, and games are going to have some big-time playoff implications. We'll start in the AFC North here with the Steelers and the Ravens. Ravens at home, they're 6-point favorites in this one. Lamar's back. How do you feel about it?
This is wild. So Lamar comes back, right? And the number goes to 6. These stats, look, again, I'm a trend better, so I like looking at trends. It doesn't mean anything, but I think it does in this series. Since 2005, the underdog in this series is 29, 12, and 3 against the number. If you expand it out to where the line is 3 points or more, it's currently 6. The underdog is 23, 5, and 3 against the spread. And in the regular season, the underdog in this game between Mike Tomlin and John Harbaugh is 24, 7, and 3. This is Steelers all day long. Take the points, +6. Sure, maybe there's a win, but this game is a 3-point win one way or the other every time these teams play.
Yeah. No, and I think the Ravens just are off. Again, maybe things change now that Lamar is back, but they just seem like a team that's off this year. That's not going to be the Ravens that we've seen in years past. It's either
and whether it be Rudolph or whether it be, it's whether Rudolph or it's Rodgers. I don't really care. Yeah. This is just a black and blue division game in December. You take the dog. Like, it's just a blind bet. Take the dog.
Yep. Yeah, speaking of another divisional game, we go to the AFC South, Colts and Jags. It's in Jacksonville, and right now the Colts, are 2-point favorites. I'm even seeing some numbers at 2.5. But for what you've got here in this one, the Colts coming in as 2.5-point favorites on the road in Jacksonville.
You're getting points with Jacksonville. Like, this is crazy. Like, this is the one team that nobody is talking about are the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah,
I don't like them either. But look at the way they're playing. Like, it's hard to argue about what is going on in Jacksonville when you start digging down into the numbers. And on top of that, these numbers for Indianapolis on the road against Jacksonville are ugly. Since 2015, Indianapolis is 3-16, 3-16-1 rather, against the number in Jacksonville. 9 quarterbacks. In that span, none of the 9 quarterbacks that the Colts have put out there in those games are above 500 ATS against the Jaguars. And if you go in road and neutral site games during this span, the Colts are 1-9 because they have played international games. They're 1-9 against Jacksonville over their last 10 games against the spread. This is Trevor Lawrence just understanding it. And we've seen Shane Steichen do this before. The teams are great in September. They're great in October. They get wishy-washy in November. And then come December, things go south. I get a home dog in December for a dome team in a divisional game. I love Jacksonville here. Give me the Jags.
Interesting. Yeah, hey, you're just counting Danny Dimes. How could you? No.
He's got a broken fibula.
Yeah,
Danny Dimes has a broken leg. He can't move. The reason why Danny Dimes was so good for this Colts offense was because his mobility under pressure. Remember, we talked about it. He led the NFL after week 8. He led the NFL in quarterback QBR and percentage of completions against pressure. When teams blitzed him, he would get to the outside edge and find his receivers, tight ends. That's where Warren killed defenses. He's a pocket passer now. This is not where you want Daniel Jones to just stand there and not be able to move.
Yeah. And we noted it too, though, as we kind of move along. A lot of really just fun matchups within the division, this weekend.
Yep.
And I think Chicago and Green Bay is one of the more exciting ones. Obviously, look, Chicago, like we talked about the fact of getting your head coach and quarterback paired right. Look what they've done. They're 8-3, but they are actually going to Green Bay as 6.5-point dogs here. Do you believe in the Bears in this one?
No, but I do believe in the Bears' ability to cover. This number is big. This is a heavy number. So this is interesting. Ben Johnson now 7-4-1 ATS as the head coach of the Bears. At home in December, Matt LaFleur is 10-1 straight up on 10 days prep, which they'll have here after the Thanksgiving Day game. 4-0 straight up in December, 6-1 straight up in December or later if you include January. It's hard to play football at Lambeau Field. It's hard to beat Matt LaFleur at Lambeau Field in December. I like the Packers to win this game, but I think this 6.5-point number is really heavy. You got to be careful here. I think the Bears can keep this game close, but I like the Packers from a money line parlay perspective. If you're going to bet that type of stuff, I think Packers win, Bears cover.
Interesting. And then the final one of the week, the Sunday night game, we got the Texans heading to KC to take on the Chiefs. Kansas City fighting for their lives right now. They're even at 6-6. They are 3.5-point favorites against the Texans. How do you like Mahomes and company against that solid Houston defense?
Texans, this is their bugaboo. 5 straight losses to Kansas City. They are 2-3 ATS against Patrick Mahomes over the last 5 games. I get that. KC is currently on a 4-game ATS losing streak, going 1-3 during that stretch. It's the first time we have seen this in the Patrick Mahomes era. And this is untested territory for them because they're not used to having their backs against the wall. Get this. Since November the 1st of last year, Patrick Mahomes is 9-15 in 24 starts, including the playoffs. He is the least profitable quarterback in the NFL over the last year plus, November to now. At 3.5, I'll take the Texans. I'll close my eyes here and take the hook and say that hook matters to me. 3-point win for the Chiefs. The best play of the game is the under. Take the under in this game. I don't think offense is going to be had at all. It's 42.5 at certain books right now. Some books are down to 41.5. Shop around. Best plays the under in the game for KC and Houston.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, hop on that 42.5 while you can, if that's the case for sure. Awesome, Matt. Hey, look, this was a fun one. As we've done more recently, we dive into a lot more with the Raiders and get your, unfiltered take on that, which I love. And then also, again, as always, delivering bangers for the folks at home. A lot of plays on the Raiders game. It's going to be an exciting one. We'll be checking in throughout the game on this one. Before we do get out of here, as always, remind the folks where they can find your stuff.
Sure. If you want just picks, it's the Daily Juice Podcast 365, wherever you guys get your podcast. If you want some long form rants like we've got in here, you can go and check out the Bostonian versus the Book on YouTube, at Boston versus the Book on YouTube.
All right. Raiders fans, hoping you can at the very least make them some money, make things a little bit better. If you guys have been listening, you probably made some money off of what Matt's done. Appreciate you, Matt. We'll see you back here next week. All right, guys, you know what time it is. I got to make my pick, and this week it really is short and sweet. I'm picking the Broncos to win. No surprises there. They're just a better team. That defense, yeah, it is unreal. The Raiders obviously can't pass block or get the running game going, and if you can't do either one of those things, you simply cannot win. It's that simple. I'm just hoping for all of our sakes, mostly you guys at home, that they do give us something to talk about as far as building blocks going forward. And as many of you noted in our last episode when I asked you the question of the day there about what you wanted to see down the stretch, you guys said that you wanted to see the young guys play more, and I'm real curious to see what that looks like on Sunday now that they are officially eliminated from playoff contention. Pete still has said it many times that he treats each and every game like it is the Super Bowl, like they have to win that game. But I wonder if there's a more future-facing approach, even if maybe he feels he's not in the fold going forward. Who knows? But the rotations that we saw in that last game were very interesting. For now, though, that is going to do it for us. If you guys made it this far, please do subscribe and hit that bell icon so you're the first to hear about our podcasts as we roll them out each and every week. As you guys know, we've got multiple of them each and every week. If you're new, well, hey, we have 3 of them. We have a post-game podcast. We've got the Wednesday version of our podcast, and then this Friday version that you've watched as well or listened to. So, again, please do make sure you subscribe. It helps, again, with the growth, the algorithm, all of that stuff. I hate asking for it, but, again, you guys have been so great, so you don't get what you don't ask for, so I keep asking for it. Next up, guys, we will catch you from Allegiant Stadium after the game on Sunday. In the meantime, take it easy, and, again, as always, thanks for watching and listening. See you later.